And let's do let me see the share screen. I think I can just do multiple participants share. So I think you can share now. Sara, I was just thinking if you want to just start saying like something about Tamar or just her name at least, and if there's something you want to share, like that we can
Okay.
Dres and Rivka, thanks for joining us.
What's that? Yeah, so the other two shluchos on here are from Australia. Tamar was of course from Melbourne, and very dear friend of mine. Tamar was passionate about the Geula and passionate about Moshiach. And my, I guess, journey into learning about Moshiach and Geula and studying the Sefer in Yonah Mashiach was really thanks to her. She's the one who kind of, I got the Sefer and she was one who said, I really want to learn this. I want to learn this. And so we made a plea to learn it together. And then when we became presidents of Neshei Chabad, it was a mutual friend who suggested that we start using it as our 10-minute Mashiach thought every night. And that's sort of how the journey started. Kayach Adar. Was her yard site, or her first yard site. So normally, like a birthday, you celebrate in the second Adar, but a yard site, since this is the first, it's 12 months, so it's today. And it just, it's interesting that Kayach Adar Aleph, we talk about in Kriya Shema, where in the Hayom Yom it says that in Kriya Shema we say Rabbanu Shalom Avroni Michael, etc. That we don't say Shabbos Yontiv, but we say on all the other days, even when there's no Tachnun. And then, of course, at the end of the three parshas, we say the word emes. And then so it talks about the very specific things that we say in Shema during the different Shabbos Yontif to other times. And it's just interesting, what jumps out at me is that just that word emes, because one of the things that Tamar really stood for was emes. She always searched to try to find the truth, wanted to know the truth, and always looked behind the facade of what something was to find the truth. And I think that we know that this world, this gullus, is sheker. I feel like we forget that, right? We think that the gullus that we're in and the challenges that we have here are emes, and that the geula and the dreams, that's the that's the dream. That's what we say, in the future we'll say Hayini Kachom, we were like dreamers. It's like we have to realize that the emes is geula, the emes is like Hashem, and everything else is really the sheker. And I think that in one of the ways of learning in Yonah Mashiach, one of the things that we're trying to do, it's like an answer once got to the Rebbe when I was going through a difficult time, and the Rebbe answered me, how you talking that somebody who grew up with Chassidus and learned Chassidus and teaches Chassidus, you know what it is that you need to do. You just have to take it from a mayach to the leif. You have to take what you understand, what you know in your head, and bring it down to the feeling. And I think that's one of the powerful things, one of the reasons why we learn this and why it's important and why I'm so happy to be learning it a second time, a third time, fourth time. It doesn't matter how many times, because we have to keep doing it until the emes of the truth of Geula, the truth of the Eibishter running this world, is what is emes for us. And everything else is sheker. And when we recognize that everything else is like hevel havolim, that sheker, then it doesn't bother us, doesn't concern us, right? We can have that very, very strong bitachon. I think that this chapter that we're actually learning right now is chapter 4, which is really about this and saying, why is this belief in Mashiach such a fundamental, important foundation of Yiddishkeit? Because if we, to summarize what we've done till now, and that leads us right into what we're going to do tonight, is that if we understand that Hashem is infinite, Hashem is infinite, and the Torah He gave us is infinite. And that means that the bris that Hashem has with us, the Yidden, that's infinite. It's nitzchi. And if that's the case, if Hashem is nitzchi, that means, and the bris that Hashem made with us is nitzchi, and it means the Torah is nitzchi. That means that we have to, the belief in Mashiach is also something nitzchi. Now, we talked about that in terms of why that's foundational then, is because if we don't believe in Mashiach, that we don't have an Am Nitzchi or a Torah Nitzchi or Hashem Nitzchi, the whole thing falls apart. And that's why the belief in Mashiach is that fundamental, a yesod, an ikar, a Yiddishkeit. Now, in our last class, we mentioned that when we talk about things that change, you can have a ratzon that changes and a ratzon that does not change. We mentioned that last time because we were saying that when we look at Nevi'im, and this is going to become important for tonight, when we look at Torah, we see that the Rambam emphasizes very much that the belief in Mashiach is something that the Torah, in other words, the Chumash itself, testifies, not just that it's in the Sifrei Nevi'im. Now, what's the difference? Because a Navi is a prophet, and a prophet is meant to guide the Jewish people on the right way. That means a Nevuah that a Navi says, if it's a good Nevuah, it's supposed to come true, because we have to be able to test the Navi in some way. But if it's a bad Nevuah, of course, if it's something that's negative that's supposed to happen, a Jew could always overcome that and change that. So the idea of a Navi is to tell us Hashem's Ratzon, but it could change. In other words, it's Hashem's Ratzon depending on a particular situation. But then there's a Ratzon of HaKadosh Baruch Hu that does not change at all. Now, we mentioned that because this concept that there is a Ratzon shemishtane, right, a desire that can change when it's contextual, when there's conditions attached to it. And then there are a Ratzon, a really internal, essential Ratzon of HaKadosh Baruch Hu that can never change. So what we've said so far is that the idea that Hashem chose the Yidden as his nation, as his Amma Nifchar, that we have the special bris of the HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that's a Ratzon Amiti. That's an essential Ratzon of the HaKadosh Baruch Hu that can never ever change. And we already saw that the idea of believing in Mashiach, the belief in Mashiach is this belief, then that understanding that without Mashiach, we can't have the Am Nitzchi, the Tar Nitzchi, the Bris Nitzchi. We have to have the Melech who brings the nation together, who unites the nation around him, and therefore makes it one nation that builds one base of Mikdash and serves the Kadosh Baruch Hu. So coming great into that, when we saw, that's where we ended off last time, that the Nitzchios of Malchus David, this eternal aspect of Malchus Beis David, and the Nitzchios of the Torah, this eternal aspect of the Torah itself, that's kshurim v'tluyim zeh b'zeh. They're actually connected to each other. And the geula, that is what is going to really bring it into practicality. It's going to bring it into the physical world as one. We'll be able to see it all together. So based on all of that, we come to our new part for tonight. The strength of this promise, and therefore the strength of this faith that we have to have. Vihine, and again, I'll start, and then others can take over.
All right.
Vihine, yeah.
No, I just wanted to share one thought because you're talking about the MS of the Nevuos. And first of all, it's interesting that the Rebbe's kapitel is very connected to despising Sheker and really wanting that MS and Shalom together. I guess the Mahoma is really just Sheker as well. And yeah, just one thought about like the eternality of the Nevuos. So I just, probably everyone knows this, but for me, and I think I heard it once before, but I just heard it again yesterday, that the Rebbe said about the Friedrich Rebbe's Nevuah, how do we know that it's nitzchi, that it's like forever? Maybe it was just the East Rotzine and, you know, we missed the boat and now, like, it doesn't really stand anymore. And the Rebbe answered that it's because the fact that the Friedrich Rebbe had it printed, or just the fact that it's printed, is a guarantee that it's nitste, because anything that's printed is meant for generations, and it's eternal. So just speaking of like the Nevuah of the Rebbe, Higias Mangu Laspem, and everything that we see in the Sicha is everything is printed, and that proves that it's eternal. It wasn't about a certain year or a certain time. That was the Eis Ratzon and a high time for Mashiach to come. There's no such thing as, like, so to speak, missing the boat, because this is something that the Rebbe edited and had printed for until Mashiach comes, that it stands 100%. So just wanted to share on the nitzchias of the Rebbe's words.
Yeah. So let's have a look and see now how do we explain it here. Vihine, we call them move on from everything we've said now, we understand. She'ilo haisav tapas ha'geula rak inyan shel tashum schar lebnei Yisrael al masei matayim v'chadayim. If Taka, we would say that the promise of geula is only to reward Bnei Yisrael for our good deeds or something like that, right? If it's just idea of reward for people, az haratzon ha'eliki b'geulas Yisrael hayinasun l'shinuyim. Then we would have to say that Hashem's desire for the geula could be subject to change, right? Let's say Bnei Yisrael are no longer worthy, or something like that. But since, as we've just seen, the main point of geula is not for the benefit of the Yidden. It's really about Hashem's kingdom being revealed in this world and being down here on this physical plane, and the fact that Hashem's mitzvahs, his decrees and commands, are kept. And therefore, the Torah is speaking with the words of man. But what does it say? Hashem says, right? I'm not doing this for you, Bnei Yisrael. I'm doing this for my holy name. Move on, where we understand. That's saying that this is something fundamental for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's l'shem kachi, it's for Hashem. It's not for us necessarily. That means it's not subject to any sort of change, and it's not dependent on the acts of the creation. So it has nothing to do with what we do or we don't do. Hashem b'Yisrael over Tzainu b'mitzvaysav, just like there is absolutely no change. It's impossible for there to be a change in Hashem's choice of Bnei Yisrael and Hashem's desire to have mitzvahs. So too, there cannot be any change in Hashem's desire for Mashiach to come. Because this becomes a very fundamental, central concept, incorporating this choice of choosing us, Bnei Yisrael, and choosing the mitzvahs is Mashiach. And now you might ask, if that's the case, so something that you just said, Rifki, before, when the Friedrich Rebbe said, the alto l'tshuva, the alto l'geula, it makes it sound like, wait a second, we're just now saying it has nothing to do with what we do or what we don't do. So why do we talk about the fact that the geula is dependent on tshuva? And therefore we answer, even though the Torah does connect our geula with doing tshuva, like it says very clearly in the Torah, that when we turn to Hashem, our God, and we listen to his voice, Shirak us, then it says only after that, and Hashem also will return with our captives. Meaning, this is not saying this. The intention here isn't that it depends on whether we do tshuva or not. Okay, that it's dependent. Ella, rather, is just telling us that it will have to be that way. What will have to happen, and what will definitely happen at the end, is that Bnei Yisrael will do tshuva, Hashem, and then Hashem will redeem them. This is what Chazal say. Hashem is going to set a king, a ruler, whose decrees are as terrible as Haman. Boy, does this ring true today, right? And he's ringing true it seems like every few years. Yisrael, I send tshuva, and then Bnei Yisrael will do tshuva, will machzir and lenutav, and they will come back and they will come back to do the right thing, to be good. Psaka Rambam, and that's what the Rambam writes as a psak. Hifticha Torah. The Torah promises us. So it's not like it's going to be dependent. The Torah is telling us a fact. This is what's going to happen. At the end, Bnei Yisrael are going to turn to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And the Torah promises, Shesayf Yisrael asas tshuva, that at the end, Bnei Yisrael will turn back to Hashem. Besides Galusai, at the end of their Galus, Umiyad Heini Galim, and immediately they will be redeemed. And therefore, and in this way, the Rebbe explains why the Rambam stresses So this is why the Rebbe explains. The Rambam emphasizes over and over again that the belief in Mashiach is something that's written not just in the books of Navi, not just from Nevi'im, but rather in the Torah and Moshe Rabbeinu, in other words, in the Chumash itself, because the Torah is testifying on it. Meaning, the Rebbe explains, what is the Rambam trying to imply here? He's emphasizing that there is a difference between words that are just in Navi versus words that are in the Chumash. And it's emphasizing that this idea of Mashiach coming is something that's dafka negeh to Torah as in the Chumash itself, not just to Navi. Why? Because as we explained earlier, because a Navi who comes along and gives a Nevuah, that does not necessarily express the fundamental ratzon of Hashem. When a Navi comes and gives a particular prophecy, when Hashem sends a Navi to give a message to the Jewish people, that's usually, it's a ratzon HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and something that has to happen that's contextual at the time. Yirmiyahu was told to go and tell Bnei Israel a certain message. Yecheskel, Yeshayahu, whatever it was a very particular time and a very particular ratzon Hashem had that they needed to do. Shalchain Kasav Rambam, and that's where the Rambam writes, Sha'navi loy lasas dasuba. A Navi doesn't come along to make Yiddishkeit, to give us Yiddishkeit. He's not coming to give us the essential rotzen of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's the mitzvah, right? That's in the Chumash. Ella lahazir esa'am. The Navi comes to warn the nation. Shelo yaru aleha. They should not transgress the Torah. In giving them promises of either reward or punishment, fitting in with their deeds, the idea of a Navi is to encourage the people and to warn them to keep the way of the Torah, but not necessarily to teach them new halachas or new Torah. Okay, and therefore, what we're talking about, if the idea of geula was just a matter of a place where we could get schar. Remember, going back to the very beginning of our sefer, we talked about, what's the purpose of the world? And we saw that actually in Hilchos Tshuva, we look at a man, we say, well, it's about man receiving, his schar. We can't say that that's really what the geula is all about. It's not about a time that we're going to suddenly be rewarded for all the mitzvahs that we did in this world. Because if it was just about reward for the mitzvahs, if it was about reward, then it would be something that our Nevi'im would have spoken about. And then again, if it was our Nevi'im who spoke about this, then we could say there could be changes, like we said before. Like every promise a Navi makes, it's contextual. A Navi comes to say what will happen based on the deeds of the people he's talking to. So therefore, if the people are behaving a certain way, something could happen. If they behave a different way, other things could happen. That's the nature of Nevuah and what a Navi does. But since we've now established that Geula, the final redemption, this world being a place where Hashem alone is the king, that is Hashem's essential Ratzon. That means that there cannot be any change in that. And that's why Nevuah, the idea of Bias Mashiach, is not written in Navi, but the Rebbe shows us how the Rambam therefore emphasizes this is something Torah He'ida I love. It's in the Chumash itself, in this Torah Nitzchi, where we have the mitzvahs for Kadosh Baruch Hu. That is where we have this belief in Mashiach. It's a fundamental main part of Torah. It's an Ikar Ratzon of Hashem. It has nothing, it's not dependent on mankind. It's not dependent on what we do or don't do. Okay. Someone else like to continue. The other side. So now we understand the strength of the Geula. Now, what does this mean about then our Emunah? Okay, so we have the strength of the Geula itself. Now, what about the person who believes?
I see, yeah, Rivka, maybe you want to read?
Yeah, I'll read as long as you translate, Sarah. Okay, במקום אחר מבאר הרבי על דרך זה בנוגע לצד השני של המטבע, תוקף בתכונה של האדם המאמין, שבתכונה בקיום הבטחת הגאולה זהו ביטחון מלא ללא מקום לספק.
Right.
So another, yeah.
Go ahead.
No, you do it. You do it.
No, you do it. I'll help you out.
Okay. In another place, the Rebbe explains the other side of the coin, that what's the strength of the belief. No, yeah, of a person who believes that his belief
trust
in
right?
His trust, right? His trust in the fulfillment of the promise of the Geula is the trust with no place for doubt.
That's right, because that's what bitachon is, right? And Emunah can have doubt. You say you believe it could happen, right? Bitachon means you trust that it will. So the idea is that when we understand the other side of this, if we understand that this is an essential Ratzon HaKadosh Baruch Hu that is not right, it cannot change, then that is also how we can have that very strong trust in it, right? Because there's no room for any doubt, because it can't change. And again, why? Right. Continue.
Ki hahevdel ben haftachos hanavi v'haftachos haksuvos b'Torah, hu lo rak mitzad ha'havtacha. Where are we? Halakis ela gam mitzad ha'adam makabel ha'havtacha. Ad kama ha'havtacha. Okay, yeah, go back. I should keep reading.
Ad kama ha'havtacha.
Ad kama ha'havtacha misameses etzlo b'vados. Yeah.
Right.
Okay, so the difference between the promise of the Navi and the promise of that are written in the Torah is not just mitzad, the promise, the godly promise, but also from the person who receives the promise or the trust, right? I don't know. Keep going, Sarah. You do. I don't know.
It's like, in other words, for the person, when we see something written in Chumash or we see something in Navi, which one do we say is for certain, is definitely going to happen? What's in the Chumash, right? So it's not just from Hashem's promise, but it also shows for us how certain we can be in whatever that promise is.
Right.
And that's why.
וכדברי הרמב"ם בהלכות יסודי התורה שהאמונה במשה ובתורתו היא אמונה מוחלטת, כיוון שבהר סיני איננו ראו ולא זר ואוזנינו שמעו ולא אחר, האש והקול והלפידים והוא ניגש אל הערפל והכל מדבר אליו ואנו שומעים משה לך אמור להם כך וכך. And that's why, like it says in the Rambam in Hilchos Sodei HaTorah, that the emunah in Moshe and his Torah is definite emunah, just like in Har Sinai, absolute emunah, right? That by Har Sinai, that our eyes saw, but not as strangers. Yeah, is that right? Mm-hmm. And our ears heard, but not someone else. And the fire and the thunder and the lightning. And Moshe approached the darkness, and the voice was speaking to him, and we heard the voice say, Moshe, go speak to Bnei Israel and tell them this and this. Masha'en ken kol navi acher. Gam kasher nosin oises al nevuasei harei hama'amin al pi ha'oisius yesh b'livoi doifi ve'enai shalem im ze b'vados gemura. So in future, because that was Torah, we know that it has to be exactly true. But I mean, with Nevi'im, it's different. I'll let you explain.
Right, because like with Moshe Rabbeinu, we know Moshe Rabbeinu was the greatest Navi of all time. Hashem spoke to him face to face, and Bnei Yisrael saw that. So we were witness. That's why the Rambam writes it in the Hilchos Yisrael Torah, that what was the difference between Moshe Rabbeinu and any other Navi of all time is that with Moshe Rabbeinu, we saw the Jew Yidden, and we talk about 600,000 men, over 2.5 million Yidden at the time, saw and heard everything that happened at Har Sinai. I heard Hashem speaking to Moshe Rabbeinu. So we know then that everything that Moshe Rabbeinu told us, we actually saw him approach HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We heard Hashem's voice, and we know it was directly to him. With any other Navi, however, we know that they have to give, and the Torah tells us, like the Navi gives us signs, and we have to wait to check whether it is a true Navi or not, right? And we have to believe based on the signs. So in the heart of a person, we hear another Navi other than Moshe Rabbeinu, there's always a sense of a doubt, is it a true Navi or not? And sometimes only time will tell whether it was a Navi Sheker or not, depending on whether that was going to come true or not. So the only one where we have complete vadas, and it's absolutely coming from the word of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, was Moshe Rabbeinu. Every other Navi was not as direct, so therefore we did not witness the direct communication the way we did with Moshe Rabbeinu. So therefore, anything that we have from Moshe Rabbeinu, that's what we say, it's emunah muchletes. It's absolute truth, and we know for absolute certainty, 2.5 million people witnessed it, that it's got to be, that's exactly how it was. Okay? And therefore, again, emphasizing again the difference between what we find in the Torah itself or in the Chumash itself versus what we find in Navi. Continue. Al pizeh.
Al pizeh mitzi harabi mashma'is nosefes b'divrei harambam hanal she'ha'emuna b'vias Mashiach hiloi al smach divrei hanavim levad ela al yisodei divrei haTorah Moshe Rabbeinu atzmai. So that the Rebbe from this the Rebbe hears and adds to the words of the Rambam that the emunah, that the belief in the coming of Mashiach is not just relying on the words of the Nevi'im, but on the basis of the words of the Torah and Moshe Rabbeinu himself.
Right. So not that the Rebbe adds to the words of the Rambam, but the Rebbe finds this meaning, finds this extra meaning in the words of the Rambam. Right? In how the Rambam writes, the Rebbe finds this meaning in it, in the fact that he writes these words. And how we see exactly how it says, right? What does the Rebbe actually say? Go ahead, here's the quote.
בפשטוס יש להם שהרמב"ם בא להדגיש תוקף האמונה וגדרה וגם זהו הלכה שהאמונה בביאת המשיח צריכה להיות בוודאוס והסעמסוס כזוי, לא כהסעמסוס שמצד שאר הנביאים בלבד, אלא הסעמסוס שמצד תורה ומשה רבנו, שהרי התורה העידה עליו.
Right.
Here we
see, that's what the Rebbe is saying. So Bapasha, that's why the Rebbe is pointing out. The Rambam is trying to stress the strength of this Emunah. Like, what are the parameters of our belief in Mashiach? And telling us that why is he emphasizing, right, the strength? Like, why does the Rambam keep focusing on where the source of this belief is? Because he's trying to emphasize the strength of this Emunah. What are the parameters of this Emunah? And that it's actually halacha. Right? That we have to have this belief has to be the vadas, a certainty, right? And a certainty in the truth of what we're saying, not like the certainty of words of Nevi'im, but the certainty that we have in Torah and Moshe Rabbeinu itself, because it's in the Torah, it's in the Chumash itself. Okay, and that's why again the Rebbe stresses al pizem muvan. Go ahead.
Al pizem muvan gam ma shehaysifu Moshe Rabbeinu ki nevuas Moshe נסעמסה במעמד הר סיני, על ידי שאיננו ראו וכולו ואזנינו שמעו. והסעמסוס בנבואת משה רבנו מביאה נאמנוס שהיא עומדת לעולם בתורה.
So again, that's why the Rebbe stresses, right? The fact that the Rambam emphasizes that it's the not Nevi'im Bilvad, but the Torah and Moshe Rabbeinu. Right, so the Rebbe is focusing. Why does the Rambam emphasize that it's based on the words of the Torah and Moshe Rabbeinu? Because by adding Moshe Rabbeinu, he's focusing on the fact that the nevuah of Moshe Rabbeinu is emes. Like we know, Moshe emes, the Torah emes. Everything Moshe told us is emes because it's from Maimon Har Sinai, where we saw very clearly that Hashem spoke to Moshe Rabbeinu. And therefore, this certainty in the Nevuah of Moshe Rabbeinu brings then the certainty in everything that he says, that it's forever, it's eternal, it's whatever's in the Torah. And that's the strength of our belief in Mashiach. It's as strong as anything else that's written in the Chumash itself. Not just the nice nevuos about that the Nevi'im say about a future Geula. Okay. Our next thing. So what do we see from these three things? Liba, would you like to read? I see you've come aboard.
Yes. Yes.
Nicole Hanal, you're muted, Liba.
מכל הנ"ל, מובן ששלושת העניינים הנ"ל, נצחיות ישראל, נצחיות מלכות דוד ונצחיות התורה, מבטאים רעיון אחד. So from all the above, we see that the three points, the eternity of Am Yisrael, the eternity of Malchus Beis David, and the eternity of the Torah, they're all bringing out, expressing one idea. נצחיות בחירתו של הקדוש ברוך הוא בעם ישראל, ומלכותו הנצחית עליהם, המתבטאת בתרי"ג מצוות התורה הנצחיות. Okay, so the eternity of Hashem choosing Am Yisrael, and the eternity kingdom of Hashem on Am Yisrael, it expressed itself in the mitzvahs, which are also eternal, how you say it? Yeah. Eternal, thank you. שעל רעיון זה עומדת דתנו הנצחית והבלתי משתנה. And on this idea stands our Yiddishkeit that is also internal and doesn't change. ולפיכך הרמב"ם הגדיר כל אחד מהם כיסוד ועיקר באמונתנו. And that's why the Rambam defines each one as a basic and important, I say, ikar,
foundation
in our belief. ועל פי זה מובן, מדוע קבע הרמב"ם את ביאת המשיח כיסוד באמונתנו, וכתב כנ"ל, and based on that we understand why the Rambam decided, how you say, קבע? Established that the coming of Mashiach is a pillar in our belief, and he wrote, שכל מי שאינו מאמין בו, או מי שאינו מחכה לביאתו, לא בשאר הנביאים בלבד הוא כופר, אלא בתורה ובמשה רבינו. So whoever doesn't believe or doesn't wait for the coming of Mashiach, not only in the old Nevi'im, he's kofar, I say kofar? He's denying not only the Nevi'im, but also he is denying the Torah and Moshe Rabbeinu. כיוון שמי שאינו מאמין בביאת המשיח, חסר אצלו באמונה בנצחיות ישראל, נצחיות מלכות דוד ונצחיות התורה. Because whoever doesn't believe in the coming of Mashiach is missing in his belief in the eternity of Am Yisrael, in the eternity of the kingdom of David and the eternity of the Torah. ובזה הרבי מוסיף ומוצא משמעות נוספת, שלישית, בדברי הרמב"ם שמחלק בין הכפירה בדברי נבואה לכפירה בדברי תורה. In this, the Rebbe finds another meaning, a third meaning, in what the Rambam is making a difference between denying the Nevi'im and denying what says in the Torah. שכוונת הרמב"ם היא להדגיש את המשמעות המרכזית של המושג ימות המשיח ביהדות. The Rambam, Rambam meaning is to emphasize the central meaning of the idea of a Mashiach in Yiddishkeit. שאין זה עניין צדדי שהתגלה על ידי הנביאים, אלא זהו עניין מרכזי הנוגע לגוף התורה עצמה. ובלשונו של הרבי, so it's not just a side thing that our Nevi'im discovered to us, taught us, but it's a central thing that is connected to the etzem of the Torah. I say it, to the essential essence of the Torah. Like the Rebbe says, בזה מדגיש הרמב"ם שהעניין של מלך המשיח, שהוא יביא לשלמות בהלכות ומצוות התורה, ולהחזיר מלכות דוד ליושנה, וחוזרים כל המשפטים. אין זה עוד עניין שהתגלה על ידי הנביאים. Okay, so Rambam emphasizes that the union of Mashiach, that he will bring completeness in the halachas and in the mitzvahs of the Torah. Like he says, he will bring back the kingdom of Mashiach like it was before, and all the mitzvahs are coming back. So this is not something that was discovered by the Nevi'im, אלא זהו עניין של התורה ומשה רבינו גופה. התורה גופה אומרת ומבטיחה שיבוא משיח, ואז תהיה שלמות התורה. So it's not something that it was discovered by the Nevi'im, but that's the essence of the Torah of Moshe Rabbeinu, that the Torah itself says that Mashiach will come and will have the completeness of the Torah.
It's a promise in the Torah. It's not a study. It's not something extra or an aside or something that happened because of time and because of events. It's fundamental. It's an ikar in the Torah itself that this is going to happen.
So where do you see that it's said in the Torah, like explicitly, this thing?
In the Torah, because in Parshas Bilam, first of all, B'Shavah Shem L'Techa Shvuscha, right? Torah Idei Love, the Rambam stresses over and over in Birchas Bilam, right? And that's the idea. It's in the Chumash itself. It's not just the voice.
Yeah. כלומר, אף שחייבים אנו להאמין לכל דברי הנביאים. So it means, even though we have to believe to all the what the נביאים told us, אך לא כל מה שהנביא אומר נהפך להיות עניין עיקרי באמונתנו. But not everything that הנביא says, it becomes essential idea in our belief. ולדוגמה, כאשר הנביא אומר שמחר ירד גשם, אף שצריך להאמין לדבריו, like an example, if the Navi says that tomorrow it will rain, so we have to believe to what he says, אין האמונה בירידת הגשם הופכת להיות יסוד בפני עצמו ביהדות, אלא זהו עניין פרטי המבוסס על העניין הכללי של האמונה בנבואה. So this belief that the rain will come doesn't change to be a sense in the Yiddishkeit for itself.
It's not a foundation, right?
It's not a foundation,
of faith. You know, like when Moshe Rabbeinu came into Mizpar and said, tomorrow there's going to be bar, or Eliyahu Novi said, the drought's going to end, it's going to rain tomorrow, whatever it might be. That doesn't mean that the Novi said something, and now that's going to be an ikar in our Amunah that we have to believe that rain's going to fall tomorrow. Right? It's not, because it's a very particular thing the Navi said based on something specific that happened at that time.
Okay, so it's okay. וזהו שמדגיש הרמב"ם כאן, שביאת המשיח אינה עניין צדדי ביהדות. So the Rambam stresses that coming of Mashiach, it's not a side thing in Yiddishkeit. עוד עניין שהתגלה על ידי הנביאים. It's not like another עניין that the נביאים discovered to us. אלא זהו עניין יסודי ועיקרי הנוגע ישירות למהותן של תרי"ג המצוות. But it's an essential, very important, essential, fundamental ikar that it has to do complete. הנוגע ישירות, I say it.
It's directly connected to the essence of the mitzvahs.
שלכן, מי שאינו מאמין בביאת המשיח, לא בשאר הנביאים בלבד הוא כופר, אלא בתורה ובמשה רבנו. So that's why whoever doesn't believe in coming of Mashiach is not only denying what the Nevi'im said, but also is denying Torah and Moshe Rabbeinu.
Right? Because the essence of the 630 mitzvahs is to reveal that Hashem is our king, to be able to complete and to be able to fulfill all of those mitzvahs in this physical world. And none of that can be done, and none of it was ever done until Mashiach comes. Like we saw, the very last mitzvah of our mikla was never fulfilled. So if we believe in Torah itself, we have to believe in Mashiach. If we don't believe in Mashiach, that means we don't believe in the rest of the Torah, because how could it be that a Torah was given to us and we've never been able to fulfill it? Or how could it be that we have a Torah that we can't actually do all of those mitzvahs? So it's directly connected to our belief in Torah and in the eternity of all the aspects that we said. Okay, and therefore, and the end.
ולהשלים את התמונה בעניין זה, חובת האמונה בביאת המשיח, נוסיף בעזרת השם בפרק הבא עוד כמה עניינים הקשורים לכך כדלקמן. So to complete the picture of this idea, the duty to believe in coming of Mashiach, we'll add in the next chapter another few inyanim that are connected to that.
Correct. Okay. So we're now up to the sikkum. So let's summarize this chapter. Rifki, want to go ahead and read us our summary?
I can read, but maybe does Drazer Dwarled, do you want to read? If you
Go
do,
ahead,
then just open your mic. Okay.
Okay.
So, Misaris that Teinohim Hamuna Benitzkes Bechiras Hakadosh Baruch Hu B'Yisrael, Nitzkes Malchus David, Benitzkes Atira. So the foundations, amongst the foundations of our religion, is the belief in the eternity of the Hashem's choice in the Yidden, and the eternity of the kingdom of David, and the eternity of the Torah. And these three concepts are connected and dependent on each other. And they all come from the power of Hashem's eternity. Because they come from the essential desire of Hashem, which can't change, which is not shaykh to change. So this is in contrast to the words of Nevi'im, which are shaykh to change, because it's not coming from the essential ratzon of Hashem. It's just, it's possible for Hashem to so to speak, regret it or go back on it, if we're talking about things that Navi predicts in the name of Hashem. Because it's like, I guess, an external ratzon. Bizman galas nira Hashem hefer chalila es habris in bnei Yisrael ve'elehem kiyum atzmayim achos v'shalahem. So in the time of Galus, it seems like Hashem, what's the word?
Chas v'shalom nullified the bris with us.
No, Chas v'shalom, his bris with the Yidden, and that we don't have our essential existence and we don't have our own king.
Independent.
And we don't have, we can't truly fulfill the mitzvahs of the Torah. So this is the belief in the coming of Mashiach, the belief that the Malchus of Hashem will return to the Yidden through the return of the kingship of David to the way it used to be. And once again, we'll fulfill all the mitzvahs of the Torah as Hashem wants.
And that's the emunah of becoming a Mashiach. That's what that emunah is, right? The emunah that we are going to have that once again.
That Hashem will be our king again and will fulfill all of his desires. But please move on to Kishem Shalai Shayach Shina B'Bchiras HaKadosh Baruch Hu B'Yisrael or Malchus David V'Lai Shayach Shina B'Ratzon Hashem B'Mitzvaysav Kach Lei Shayach Shina B'Ratzon Eliki B'Bias HaMashiach. So according to this, it's understood that just like there's no possibility for Hashem to change his mind about his choice of specifically the Jewish people, or his choice of Dafka, that the Malchus should be in the family of David, and his there can't be a change in Hashem's desire for the mitzvahs. So in the same way, it's not possible for there to be a change in Hashem's desire for Mashiach, because when Mashiach comes, that's when we're going to have all these three things, like to see the eternity of the Yid and David, like David, Malchus David and Hashem's mitzvahs. The Fizim of our Rebbe as Hadgashas HaRambam Shamun Bebeis Mashiach Kshura Lerak in Divrei HaNeviim Elim Matara Moshe Rabbeinu. And according to this, the Rebbe emphasizes how no, the Rebbe explains why the Rambam emphasizes that the Emunah in Mashiach is connected not only to the words of the Nevi'im, but to the Torah and Moshe Rabbeinu himself. Kalaimer, she'ein za'in sheshayach b'shinoi. What he wants to emphasize is that there's no possibility of change here, like in the Divrei Nevi'im. Ela'in atzmi shaloi shayach b'shinoi, k'divrei Torah. But the coming of Mashiach is an essential thing that has no possibility to change, like the words of Torah. Zayis v'ayit she'adam hashemiah divrei nevuah yesh b'li by daifi. Mashiach kin manase v'Torah she'al yisayid ma'amad har Sinai she'einenu ra'u v'lazar ein b'shum pikvuk. So a person who hears a nevuah, he could have some doubt. Is that what it's saying? But when it comes to the Emunah and the Torah, which was revealed before our eyes, not, it's not that someone else saw Hashem, we ourselves saw it. There's no doubt. Is that what it means? And therefore, when the belief in the coming of Mashiach is connected to the Torah itself, then it's like the Emunah is in full force. It stands like strong and solid. So because the belief in the coming of Mashiach expresses foundations of Yiddishkeit, that's why the Rambam established the coming of Mashiach as one of the 13 principles of our faith. And this is the meaning of the Rambam adding the words that someone who denies the coming of Mashiach is not only denying the Nevi'im, but also he's denying the entire Torah and Moshe Rabbeinu. Shebezehu writes lahadlish es chashivas u'markazias hamunah bebeis Mashiach, because he wants to emphasize with us the importance and centrality of our belief in the coming of Mashiach. Shehi inyan yisaydi hanegea leguf hamunah b'Torah atzma v'lo inyan stadi she'eskala idei nevi'im, which is a foundational concept, which affects the basis of our emunah in the Torah itself, and not a side like issue that the Nevi'im revealed to us.
Exactly. Okay.
So
now we finish our
yes,
chapter.
definitely coming.
So
not shy to change.
It's what that we have to, right? We have to work on this. We have to help everybody, our family, and everyone understand this. And just like we believe in Shabbos, we keep Shabbos, and we know that it's Shabbos. So too, we know that Mashiach is coming. It's exactly the same way. And the strength of our belief in any mitzvah that we do, and how we know that anything that we do in Torah is absolute and correct and the right thing to do and the right thing to believe in. So too, this coming of Mashiach is intrinsically connected to all of those other things and has the same strength and has the same promise as anything else that's written in the Torah.
Right, but even like Shabbos and kosher, those are not from the Yud Gimel Ikrim, because those are like details.
They're not, but people say, they understand Shabbos. They say it's in the Torah. Like no one's gonna, what's the Quran? Most people understand. Yes, Shabbos. Oh, we have to keep Shabbos. The Torah says we have to keep Shabbos, right? Not to say, oh, the Torah doesn't talk about Shabbos. Then the Torah talks about Shabbos. Well, we know that in our day-to-day things, like, we say, you have things like, people put on tefillin, they put on mezuzahs, and these are like, you have a keyword here and a keyword there in the Torah, and we know that's how we know tefillin, from a keyword, it's put it as a sign between your eyes and a sign on your hand. We don't even have the details of it in the Torah, right? The details of it are in Torah Sheba'al Peh, in the Gemara tells us the details. It's halacha l'moshe Sinai. It's not detailed in the Torah. And even Shabbos just says keep Shabbos. Yeah, we keep Shabbos with all the intricate halachas, and you can go ahead and do all of that. And that's not even specifically written in the Torah explicitly. It's all based on Torah Sheba'al Peh, how it's explained. When we come to Moshiach, Moshiach is written very explicitly in the Torah, right? It's in the Birchas Bilam. It's right there, very specifically. Darach Kachem Yaakov v'kam Shevim Yisrael, right? Asher V'lata. It's all there. And when we look at that, and when then Rambam goes through and gives us every single one of those psukim in Birchas Bilam, and shows how one is referring to David HaMelech and one is referring to Mashiach of his time. So we see all of these details. They are in the Torah explicitly. So how much more so if we understand that the mitzvahs that we do in our daily lives, and we do them when we say because they're in the Torah, how much more so is this belief in Mashiach that people seem to struggle with? Say, no, this isn't Ikar. Why is this an Ikar? This is what the whole Torah is about. And it has actually more detail in the Torah than some of the other mitzvahs that people do that are only hinted to in the Torah, right? Yeah, we know for sure they're in the Torah. So how much more something like Mashiach, where they're explicit psukim relating to Mashiach and what will happen with Mashiach, and understanding that this is really the culmination of everything, what the whole Torah is about. And then we have to strengthen that trust. And recognize and to feel that all the challenges that we have, like we said at the very beginning of tonight, it's Hevel, it's Sheker. The emes is HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but we are still in an Olam. And as long as we're in Golos and we don't see the Aleph of Geula, then we're stuck in the Golos. We see the Arafah, we see the darkness. And our challenge, what the Rebbe kept saying, is open your eyes and see the Geula. We have to find the Aleph in the Golos. We have to put the Aleph into the Golos. And that is Geula. We have to recognize that this is HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And this is Hashem. And Hashem is pushing us. Hashem wants us to demand Mashiach. He wants us to believe with our full strength. He doesn't want us to be scared by the world and their crazinesses, but to stand strong and say, this is Mashiach on the way. The world is trembling because Mashiach is banging on the door. And we need to hold on to that with the taikif of our bitachon and spread it and encourage others and help them to understand it so that we will be zeichet to see Mashiach, Mata Masar Tvachim, Bohi Galenu. Now.
Thank you so much, Sara, and thank you, Rosenfeld, for reading, and for Landry's and anyone else who joined. And how do you say, to be continued in Yerushalayim.
Amen.
Amen.
Thank you.
Good night.